All right, so we're recording. So, good morning, everybody. I'm Mark. As you guys know, I introduced myself yesterday. I am both a lecturer in the Department of Psychology at SDSU, and I've got this weird, unique role as faculty in residence in instructional technology services. Basically, I began that role back in '07. I've been at SDSU since the year 2000. So I just finished my 16th year teaching there. And the faculty in residence job is one where for 3 or 4 years, I was a willing enough guinea pig to do a lot of different things that most people are like, yeah, I don't want to try that. And they said, let's bring you on as the guy that can do this sort of proselytizing. I was asking Scott about how to get more people to do these kinds of things. So what I'm going to talk about today is my use of, I got to tap it in the right spot, my use of adaptive quizzing in my Psych 101 course. And I'm sort of preaching to the choir a little bit. You guys are well aware of the differences here between conventional quizzing and adaptive quizzing, so I won't beat this into the ground. But basically moving away from a model where everybody gets a standard set of questions to one where hopefully, given the algorithms behind it and all the cool stuff that Alex was talking about yesterday, there's customization, right, and it sort of meets the students where they are. And if you understand what's going on in the bio chapter, you might move through it in 12 or 15 or 20 questions. And if another student doesn't really understand, they might answer 40 or 50 questions. And so I think that's a huge advance in how I've been using these quizzing tools over the years. LearningCurve, we know well, is one of several different adaptive quizzing tools. We won't name the others. This is the best one that I've seen. This game-like interface, I think, is a key part of it. I remember vividly the first time I sat he's going to be my 9th grader now. He was in 4th or 5th grade, and I sat him down. I said, I want you to just bang on this. I don't care about the content, whether you know the answers or not. And he started hitting on buttons and answering questions and getting excited. And he's like, oh, I have to clear the level, right? And that was an eye-opener for me to have the students think about this, not so much as am I getting a 60 or 70 or an 80 on this quiz, but instead, like, I'm working towards getting done this level, and then some new world will open up, and cool things will happen, and I'll have new powers and all this sort of stuff. So I think that's a key part of what we have going on with LearningCurve. So let me tell you a little bit about this setup here. I'm just going to throw all the stuff on the screen at once so we can look at it together. I'm going to talk about some data. This is from several years ago, but the data are still relevant to what we're talking about on this get-together here in New York. This was a spring 2012 pair of courses where my 8 o'clock section was about 300 students, and the 9:30 section, because they like to sleep in, was 500 students. That always happens in the spring. Neither one completely fills, and the 8 o'clock definitely doesn't come anywhere near doing this. So if you give a psychologist 2 groups, what are they going to do? They're going to do something to one and something not that to the other. So I define the 8 o'clock section as the traditional quizzing. You're going to do these 10 quizzes or these 10 questions before we move into the chapter, and then these 10 questions when we're done and so forth, with the 9:30 section being the experimental group, the LearningCurve. So the 8 o'clock section, we had 14 chapters worth of pre-lecture quizzes and then 14 mastery quizzes. The scoring is set up there. I made it so that, you didn't really need to know much of anything, right, to get credit. I'll give you 5 points, even if you get to like a D level, right? Most of it, by the way, came about the quizzing, even before I went from traditional quizzing to adaptive quizzing, was based on the fact that I realized after a couple of years teaching at SDSU that if they were left to their own devices, they would do nothing, literally nothing. So all this was sort of nudging them towards better behaviors as students. I gave them unlimited attempts, and basically I'm pretty generous with how these quizzes count. It's a 1/6 of your grade. What I always tell the students when we start the semester is, the tests in this course are only worth about 2/3 of your grade. And there's 1/3 of your grade that even if you have a clunker on one of the tests, if you maximize what I call the easy points, and these are some of them, you can do pretty well. I mean, I have students who get Ds on the first test and end up with a B- or a B in the course. So it's not a class where you got 3 tests, and if you mess up one of them, you're screwed, because I think that's bad course design to put it that way. If you're curious what my classroom looks like, there it is from way in the back. It's like a Where's Waldo thing. I think that's me up there all pixelated and this guy's on YouTube or I don't know what he's doing. If you've never taught a class of this size, it's, I was talking to somebody last night at dinner saying it's sort of a combination of education and entertainment, right? If you can't do a little bit of, entertainment and, communicating with them and joking around with them, you're going to lose them. If you're just going to stand there and lecture for 75 minutes like, the guy in Ferris Bueller, you're done, right? It's just not going to work. So, so that's kind of what my class looks like. So this pilot, what we did was we had the 9:30 section do the learning curve quizzes, the 8 o'clock section do the traditional quizzes. I made the points equal, so the learning curve activities were 10 points per chapter. So, you guys know if you've used this product, sometimes there are 2, sometimes there are 3, sometimes there are 4 learning curves. I just jiggled around the points, right? The first one, if there were 3, was 4, 3, and 3, whatever. Always with wiggle room, by the way, right? So the max you're going to get is 120. So if you do them all, you can actually get 140. This is like a big thing if you've never taught a big class and suddenly you have to teach a big class. Build in wiggle room, right? So that you don't need to hear about they went to visit grandma who doesn't have Wi-Fi, and just have more available than you ultimately count, and then you're never resetting things or making things available again. I don't need to know why you didn't get it done. That's one of the ones that you can miss. And it even helps actually at SDSU on the front end when students add the course pretty late. I don't know what it's like at your institutions, but I have students who add really late, and then at like week 9, they're like, hey, can I go back and get some of those points? And I'm like, well, we have to start at some point, right? Like, there has to be like a start time. I can't wait. It's not, like the plane takes off, right, at some point. So we go in this course at some point. I guess it's appropriate that we're calling it a pilot here. So I didn't put error bars in because it makes the folks from the College of Arts and Letters cry. So I'm just going to throw the numbers up here, means and medians. And the reason I split them out is my means are always screwed up by the fact that I have 8 to 10% of my students in my class who just give up, right? We get past the drop add time, and I get all these crazy low, they're not even Fs, they're like Ks or Ls, really, really low. So in terms of just the points, right, for this quizzing part of the course, the learning curve kids, the median, like almost everybody got them all because you just sit there and keep doing questions, right? And again, nudging them towards more engagement and simply more time on task, right? Because again, left to their own devices, they're probably going to do nothing. What else do I have for you here in terms of fun stuff? So that's if you wanted to know what those broke out to. That's about a third of a letter grade. If you're looking at medians, the advantage for the kids doing this new treatment with learning curve. Total number of questions completed. This was the thing I got most excited about, right? Over the course of the semester, they were averaging almost 1,700 questions done versus about 600 in that traditional quizzing approach. You know what's really cool about that? The people on the red bar on the right, do they know that they're doing 3 times more? No. Right? So it's like they're eating their broccoli and they don't know that the other class is having chocolate. I love that, that element, again, time on task. And just, I think about a lot of the stuff in terms of sports analogies, right? Like this is like, they get like 3 times the time in the batting cage, right? And they're just there seeing pitch after pitch after pitch, all these questions, and a significant advantage over what was going on in the other section for sure. With all apologies to the presidential candidate, I don't know if he's still running or whatever, feel the burn here. And I heard somebody talking about how much students go beyond what they're required to do with learning curve, and I think somebody was quoting some numbers this morning, but more than half of them actually did more than that minimum, right? The 120 is what you need to get to maximize the points, but they just keep going, right? More than twice as many of them are going beyond what's necessary to max out those points, which anytime my students are doing more than required, I'm just flabbergasted. Some data here from this within that spring semester. If you just look down the right side, again, I broke out means and medians here. The learning curve advantage is on the order of about a half a letter grade. Here's what I'd say about this. There are obviously lots of other factors that could explain this, right? So the learning curve was 9:30 versus 8 o'clock. So maybe some of the kids who got stuck in the 8 o'clock had lower priority for registration because they had other right, there's lots of things that could explain this. So it looks like it's heading in the right direction. At some point in this process of doing what I'm doing here, we had some conversations with Mark McDaniel, somebody mentioned yesterday, and he's like, well, slice and dice it and look at like the 9:30 from that spring to like a previous 9:30 in the spring, right? And I'm going to show you some of those numbers. And they don't look as overwhelmingly convincing, but they're still going in the right direction. My institution is obsessed with D's and F's. So I was able to show 40, it's not always 43% D's and F's. Sometimes it is, though. 43 versus 23. That number typically runs for me in fall and spring combined, probably 24 to about 29 or 30%. So, you know, this is associated with decreases in the D's and F's, which is a good thing. Here is the suggested idea of looking at that spring versus another spring without learning curve. So the first column is when we did this pilot. Let's look back to a year previous where it was the same time of day and it was during the spring, because I don't know, for you guys it matters at SDSU, fall versus spring. My spring is always a little bit better because they've survived the fall. Right? There's some people who failed the fall and don't show up again in the spring, so that looked pretty good. What else do I have here? I rolled it over into the fall and looked at that following semester, fall 2012, versus the previous fall without learning curve. Not as rosy of a picture in terms of the results here. I'm just throwing lots of numbers at you, and I know it's a bit much, but then this was also fall at 9:30 with and without learning curve, fall 12 versus fall 11. So generally looking like things are going in the right direction. This was the following. This was that same spring during the pilot where I broke the section out in terms of whether they had done all the learning curve activities or not, right? So did you break through the finish line and get all these easy points? And basically, if you will go and get all the easy points, your chances of getting D's and F's are really, really low, right? Now, obviously, there's lots of third variables there, and there's a motivation and other things, but to keep it really simple on day one, I show them something like this. And I'm like, look, if you will just do this part, like, I can't guarantee you won't get a D or an F, but if you're doing this, then I talk about third variables. I'm like, you're probably also coming to class. You probably also are motivated to do well. You care about, you know, being a good student. This is something that goes into that mix. And so it's, you know, a nice thing to, on the front end, nudge them towards doing, again, these things that we know will help them. I think that's actually everything I've got. So I've got this good-looking guy with questions or comments or concerns on it.
For your traditional quiz, without the learning curve, did you pick those questions off of the learning curve test bank?
I did not. I used what the pre-made, it was a pre-lecture mastery quizzes, so whatever was the pre-made set of questions.
Came with a textbook.
Yes, yeah. So I didn't curate that or customize that in any way. I was trying to swallow it all. Yeah,
but they were randomized and stratified.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
okay.
He knows everything. Just ask him if I am not explaining something. What else? Any other questions or thoughts? Or?
So are you going to separate out your groups by